Is it true that oil is disappearing? It's no secret that Saudi Arabia has long been one of the world's top producers and exporters of oil, with the country heavily relying on this industry for economic growth and stability. But what happens when the vast reserves of black gold eventually run out? Is it really just a matter of time before Saudi Arabia's economy collapses? In this video, we'll explore Saudi Arabia's dependency on oil, its ambitious Vision 2030 plan, the role of sports and mega projects in rebranding the nation, and whether these efforts will be enough to secure its future. So let's get started. Big changes are happening right now that will make our future energy systems look quite different by the end of the 2020s. Do you know how fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas have made up about 80% of all the energy we use globally? By 2030, that's expected to go down to 73%. Not only that, but the amount of carbon dioxide we release into the air from burning energy will reach its maximum level by 2025 and start decreasing after that. Have you heard about the World Energy Outlook, WEO? It's like a really important book that gives us predictions about energy. This latest version tells us that by 2030, clean energy technologies will be used much more than they are now. Just imagine there will be about 10 times the number of electric cars on the road in Saudi Arabia. Solar panels will be producing more electricity than what is used by the entire United States right now. Also, about half of the world's electricity will come from renewable sources, up from around 30%. More people around the world will start using electric heating systems, like heat pumps, than gas or oil boilers. Plus, PIF finalizes 3 deals aiming to establish solar and wind energy equipment manufacturing in Saudi Arabia. And here's a fun fact. China, one of the biggest countries in the world, will be putting up almost 60% of all new renewable energy systems between now and 2030. This shift is a positive change for many, but for Saudi Arabia, it's a serious challenge. As the world moves towards cleaner and more sustainable energy sources, the oil demand will inevitably decrease. This means that countries like Saudi Arabia, whose economies heavily rely on oil exports, will face major economic challenges. Saudi Arabia is the second largest oil producer and the world's leading exporter. The oil industry currently accounts for about 50% of Saudi Arabia's GDP, 70% of government revenues, and around 90% of exports. This implies that any decrease in demand or oil prices will directly impact the country's economy. Without a strong and diversified economy, Saudi Arabia may face major challenges in providing employment opportunities and social services and maintaining its current standard of living. Before we explore the potential consequences of Saudi Arabia's oil dependency, it's important to understand how this reliance on oil came to be. In the early 20th century, Saudi Arabia was a primarily agricultural country with no significant oil resources. However, in 1938, large quantities of oil were discovered in the region, leading to a dramatic shift in the country's economic landscape. Since then, the country has heavily invested in developing its oil industry and has become one of the world's top producers. As a result, Saudi Arabia became dependent on oil for its economic growth and stability. Rather than making money from producing things or providing services, Saudi Arabia makes a ton from selling oil to other countries. The government of Saudi Arabia also gets a big chunk of money from these oil sales. It's so much money that they don't have to rely much on taxes to pay for things. It helps the government employ many people and gives them the chance to provide welfare and subsidies to its people. This rentier economy, where a country's income relies heavily on one natural resource, has allowed Saudi Arabia to experience rapid development and modernization. However, it also created an economy vulnerable to fluctuations in the oil market. In response to the potential risks of relying solely on oil for economic growth, Saudi Arabia launched Vision 2030 in April 2016 by Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It's a program about changing the way Saudi Arabia's economy works. It's a plan designed to help Saudi Arabia become less dependent on oil. It's kind of like having a backup plan. So, if the demand for oil goes down, the country's economy won't nosedive. The main goals of Vision 2030 are to build a lively and active society, make the economy strong and healthy, and create a nation that's ready for big challenges. One of the ways they're trying to do this is by focusing more on renewable energy. By 2030, they hope to produce half of the country's electricity using wind and solar power. Their plan is already showing results. By 2023, the money they made from things other than oil had doubled, making up half of the country's real GDP. Plus, the private sector's contribution to GDP had reached 45%. That's a big deal because it means the country is starting to rely less on oil and more on other industries. One of the key components of Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 is a strong commitment to expanding solar and wind energy projects, with an ambitious goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. Did you know that by 2030, Saudi Arabia has a big goal to produce 58.7 gigawatts of renewable energy? The exciting part is that they're planning for 40 gigawatts of this energy to come from solar photovoltaics. Saudi Arabia is not just looking at different energy sources, but also putting a lot of money into new tech stuff, like artificial intelligence and electric vehicles. They want an economy that runs on knowledge, not just oil. This is also a part of their Vision 2030. For this, they're making things like the National Strategy for Data and AI, which helps to bring AI into many parts of life to make things run smoother and help the economy grow. As part of Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia has initiated several ambitious projects to transform the country into a global hub for tourism and culture. One of the most remarkable projects is The Line, a revolutionary urban development in Neom, a region that aims to redefine the concept of urban living. The Line is envisioned as a linear city that stretches 170 kilometers and will rely entirely on renewable energy, prioritizing walkability and eliminating the need for cars and roads. Neom itself is an expansive project that includes the Line and other futuristic endeavors like Oxagon, a sustainable city built over the water, and Trojena, a year-round destination for outdoor sports enthusiasts. Another significant initiative is the Red Sea Project, which aims to establish a luxury tourism destination along Saudi Arabia's west coast. Through these projects, Saudi Arabia hopes to attract 100 million tourists annually by 2030, significantly boosting its non-oil economic sectors and further establishing it as a leading global tourist destination. Despite progress, the question remains, can these investments replace oil revenue in time for Saudi Arabia to achieve economic stability and diversification by 2030? Saudi Arabia has big plans to change how people see it and prepare for a future that's not so dependent on oil. They're using sports as a major part of this plan. They will host the WTA Tour Finals, a major women's tennis tournament, showing their interest in high-level sports. In 2023, Saudi professional football clubs spent almost $957 million, which is only second to the English Premier League's spending. Plus, they'll host the World Cup in 2034, and they've even become the main sponsor of FIFA through Aramco, their state oil company, with a $100 million deal each year. By rebranding itself as a hub for luxury and sports, Saudi Arabia hopes to attract more visitors and diversify its economy. Moreover, Saudi Arabia is investing billions in major global companies and brands, such as $3.5 billion in Uber, $10 billion in Amazon, and a 60% stake in EV maker Lucid. This helps them diversify their portfolio and allows them to be part of the global economy and expand beyond just oil. Although the progress made through Vision 2030 is commendable, the country still faces challenges, transitioning from an oil-dependent economy to a more diversified one. One of the biggest challenges is balancing economic growth with social and cultural changes. With increasing investments from foreign companies and tourists, Saudi Arabia must maintain its religious and cultural practices while also adapting to new ideas and lifestyles. For a country to have a strong business sector, it needs to make changes that guarantee everyone gets a fair chance to compete and win the trust of investors. However, moving away from relying on money from oil sales may be risky. Changes in oil prices can change how much money the government has to spend, and this can affect the business market indirectly. The Public Investment Fund, PIF, of Saudi Arabia, which is responsible for managing and investing in the country's non-oil assets, faces the challenge of balancing its investments to reduce risks while still generating profits. The PIF has already diversified its portfolio to include sectors such as retail, real estate, and healthcare, but it needs to ensure that these investments are sustainable and can withstand changes in the global economy. Think of PIF as a big family bank account. MBS is like the dad who's in charge of the money, and he gets to choose where it goes. Instead of dealing with lots of paperwork and slow government processes, he can direct the money more like a business investor. It's a faster, more flexible way to use the state's funds. Moreover, reforms in areas such as women empowerment and changes in social norms are pivotal for attracting foreign investments and talent to Saudi Arabia. Empowering women in the workforce opens up a substantial pool of untapped talent and enriches the overall economic environment, making it more dynamic and inclusive. In fact, the number of women working in Saudi Arabia is growing. Back in 2017, only about 21 out of 100 workers were women. But guess what happened by the third part of 2023? The number jumped up all the way to around 34 out of 100 workers. However, Saudi Arabia is not the only country in the region aiming for transformation. It faces competition from other Gulf states, such as the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, which are also investing in women's education and employment, diversifying their economies, and promoting the growth of more inclusive societies. For example, Qatar has set a course for transforming its economy, focusing on investments in areas where science thrives, such as education, healthcare, and the information and communication technology sector. These steps are being taken with the ambitious goal of diversifying the economy and reducing reliance on traditional sources of income. When it comes to sports, Qatar has already hosted the 2022 FIFA World Cup and the 2027 Basketball World Cup, and 2030 Asian Games are on the horizon. Hosting these major events further establishes Qatar as a central hub for sports in the Middle East. Similarly, the UAE has made significant strides in diversifying its economy, particularly through the establishment of free economic zones and investor-friendly policies. The country has also invested heavily in infrastructure development, transforming it into a hub for tourism, trade, and travel. A prime example of this is Dubai, which has become one of the most visited cities in the world. The UAE has also made efforts to improve its education system, focusing on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, to attract more international investors and businesses. Keeping things steady and preventing social upheaval during this period of change presents quite a few hurdles for Saudi Arabia and its nearby Gulf nations. These countries aim for big changes in their economies and must carefully manage how their people feel and react to such swift transitions. One major concern is to make sure there are enough job opportunities and a fair distribution of money for everyone, especially as they move away from relying on oil. Any sudden shifts in job availability or income balance could cause unhappiness and potential turmoil among the citizens. Also, it's essential to find the right balance when introducing more progressive social tendencies, all while respecting time-honored values. If Vision 2030 succeeds, Saudi Arabia could become a major leader in green energy and new ideas. Imagine the country being like a giant, shining example for others to follow. Clean energy sources like solar and wind power won't just help the environment, but also show how to balance modern technologies with tradition. Their focus on new technologies could lead to inventions that everyone worldwide wants to use. At the same time, by investing heavily in tourism and sports, Saudi Arabia could become a popular place for people worldwide to visit. The kingdom is in a favorable position, with a current account surplus of $7.6 billion and relatively low inflation, which stood at just 1.7% in September 2024. When it comes to oil, a big moneymaker for the kingdom, prices have evened out, sitting around $70 a barrel. With that stability, funding for Vision 2030 doesn't seem like such a daunting task. A transformative shift in Saudi Arabia's economic model, driven by Vision 2030, could fundamentally alter its role in the Middle East and its relationships with major powers like the US and China. On May 2024, Saudi Arabia's finance minister met with his Chinese peer, concluding positive talks to strengthen their collaboration in areas such as artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and smart cities. This builds on the comprehensive strategic partnership established in December 2023 by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and China's Xi Jinping. Earlier in 2023, China had a significant role in brokering peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Saudi Arabia even invited the informal BRICS group, composed of China, Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa, in August 2023. The Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, which resonates with Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030, promises considerable investments that could help Riyadh diversify its economy from overly reliant on oil. These developments grant Saudi Arabia considerable potential for growth and modernization. Meanwhile, the kingdom is working to balance this newfound economic potential from China with its deep-rooted strategic partnership with the US, crucial for regional security and stability. One thing is clear, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, share your thoughts on whether Saudi Arabia can move away from oil. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.